Welcome everybody to the second webinar in our masterclass series where we take a deep dive into specific retirement benefits, specific planning considerations that are unique to you as Verizon employees who are considering retirement. Today we have an incredibly important topic to people who are considering retiring before the age of 59 and a half, and that is how you can avoid early withdrawal penalties from your retirement accounts. Now, with that in mind, the two methods that we're going to talk about today that the IRS provides you to access your retirement wealth penalty-free if you retire before 59 and a half are great resources for you to use if you're planning on an early retirement. However, there are some complexities and nuances associated with both of these methods that should be understood before implementing them in your retirement plan. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to take a deep dive into both of these benefits, both of these methods, and discuss how they could be a benefit to you in your retirement planning. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, my name is Bobby Hapanowicz. I'm a wealth advisor at Hapanowicz and Associates, and we've been working with Verizon employees for over 20 years. We've helped hundreds of Verizon employees with their retirement planning. And while we aren't affiliated with Verizon in any way, we use this experience that we've had over the past 20 years to provide this masterclass series to you. And with that in mind, we also created a resource specifically for Verizon Associates called the Retirement Red Zone on our website. You can check that out at www.retiringfromverizon.com. There are great resources here for everybody to use, regardless of what stage of their career that they're at, whether that's early in their career, later in your career, starting to consider retirement, or already retired. There are great resources here that you can use to help you understand your benefits better and what the role that they can play in your retirement planning. So what we'll be covering today, before we get into the two methods that we discussed for accessing retirement wealth before the age of 59 and a half, we'll discuss the broad IRS rules associated with accessing your retirement wealth. And that's mainly known as the 59 and a half rule, right? So once we discuss that, we'll get into the age 55 rule and the 72T payment program. Those are those two methods. We'll do a comparison and contrast of those two methods. We'll go through a couple of case studies that can show you how those methods could be a benefit to you. And finally, we have some Q&A. Some of you submitted questions when you registered for the webinar. We thank you for that. We also have some frequently asked questions that we'll review too. And you'll notice that there is a Q&A box if you look at your screen here. And if you have any questions, feel free to submit those in the Q&A box and we'll make sure to address those at the end of the webinar. So let's get right into it by discussing the broad IRS rules for retirement distributions. So retirement accounts are also known as qualified accounts, meaning they qualify for special tax treatment. And there's a couple of different ways that special tax treatment could be handled. Traditional contributions to qualified accounts are funded with pre-tax dollars, and growth of those contributions are tax deferred when the assets are withdrawn. Roth contributions to qualified accounts are handled a little bit differently. Roth contributions are made with after-tax dollars, and any growth of those contributions is tax deferred. And ultimately, if you make qualifying withdrawals after the age of 59 and a half, those withdrawals are completely tax-free. So there are many different types of qualified accounts or retirement accounts. We have a couple of common examples here that you may be familiar with. Many of you have a 401k at Verizon or a prior employer. There are individual retirement accounts or IRAs that you can hold outside of an employer. Or some of you, maybe your spouse worked for the public school or a charitable organization and had a 403b at that organization as well. These are different examples of retirement accounts. So with that preferential tax treatment that comes with retirement accounts comes the caveat, the trade-off that you can't typically access retirement accounts before the age of 59 and a half. And if you do, there's a 10% penalty that is applied to any non-qualifying distributions in addition to any applicable taxes that would be owed. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to those rules, and those include for first-time home purchases, qualifying medical expenses, hardship withdrawals, or qualifying higher education expenses. There are, again, a couple of ways that early retirees who retire before the age of 59 and a half, can avoid those 10% penalties while creating income for themselves in retirement. Those are the age 55 rule and the 72T payment program, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of the webinar discussing here today. Okay, so the age 55 rule states that you can retire anytime between the calendar year you turn age 55 and 59 and a half. And if you take if you take withdrawals directly from the retirement plan of the employer you retire from, those withdrawals will be penalty free. Now, you'll still owe taxes on those withdrawals if those were or if those were traditional contributions. As a matter of fact, Verizon automatically withholds 20% for taxes. However, again, those will not be penalized. There will not be a 10% penalty. One of the benefits of the age 55 rule is you can decide how much you withdraw each calendar year. You could decide if you take an age 55 rule this year and decide not to take one next year, you can take different amounts out this year versus next year. That's definitely a benefit when you compare that to the 72T payment program, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the assets must remain within the retirement plan in order to take age 55 rule withdrawals. And there's a specific nuance for the Verizon plan. It's not an IRS rule, it's a Verizon rule. If you're a Mid-Atlantic associate, Verizon only allows for one distribution per calendar year from the 401k. So there's a little bit of extra planning that goes into that to make sure that one distribution you can take will be enough to last you throughout the year. Okay, so that's an overview of the age 55 rule. Now we'll go over some common mistakes that we see or some misconceptions that we hear when discussing the age 55 rule with people thinking about implementing it. So the first one is not understanding the exact timing rules that will qualify you to use the age 55 rule. And there's a couple of different ways that this mistake can be made. Trying to take penalty-free withdrawals from your retirement plan when you retire before the year you turn 55 is one mistake. So for example, this person would be 52 years old, they'd keep assets within their 401k, and then they'd wait a few years until they turn 55 and try to take age 55 rule withdrawals. You can't do that because that person retired before the year they turned 55. That withdrawal would incur a 10% penalty. The other way we see people making this mistake is they think they can only use the age 55 rule if they retire on or after their 55th birthday. And that's not true. The age 55 rule states you can retire anytime in the year you turn age 55. That means you could be 54 at the time of the withdrawal. And this could be particularly important for Verizon associates who have that pension lump sum that is interest rate sensitive. Right now, we're in a rising interest rate environment, and somebody who's 54 turning 55 later this year has the opportunity to retire today and lock in lower pension rates if that makes sense for their broader retirement plan. They don't have to wait till they turn 55 later this year when interest rates are higher and pension lump sums are lower. So that's an example of how understanding the nuances of these rules can help you not only avoid penalties, but maximize your retirement benefits at Verizon too. But here we have an example that should help you understand a little bit more the timing rules associated with the age 55 rule. So Sally Smith's 55th birthday is September 27th, 2022. So the question is, could Sally use the age 55 rule if she retired in any of these scenarios? The first scenario is September 27th, her birthday in the prior year. Because she's retiring prior to the year she turned age 55 and a half, she cannot use the age 55 rule. However, in scenarios 2 and 3, she's retiring in the year she turns age 55. So it doesn't matter whether she's 54 or 55, because it's in the year she turned age 55, she can use age 55 rule withdrawals from her retirement plan. Same goes for the fourth scenario here, June 1st, 2023. It's in or after the year she turned age 55. She can use the 55 rule in this scenario, or at any time later than that for that matter too. Okay, mistake number 2, trying to take age 55 rule distributions from a prior employer's retirement plan. This is only allowed from the plan of the employer that you retired from. You can only take age 55 rule distributions from the plan of the employer you retired from. If you want to take withdrawals from other plans, you must roll over the assets to the current employer's plan before you retire. That's important, before you retire. So we have an example to walk you through here too. John Smith works for Verizon and has $75,000 in his Verizon 401k and $700,000 in his previous employer plan. If John Smith retires from Verizon, can he use the Verizon 401k for age 55 rule distributions? Yes, he can. Can he use his previous employer plan for age 55 rule distributions? No, he can't. He would have to roll those assets over, as you see here in example 3. John would have to roll over the assets prior to retiring from Verizon. If he rolls them over to his Verizon plan prior to retiring from Verizon, then he can use those assets using the age 55 rule. Okay, mistake number 3, not understanding the rules specific to your retirement plan. So we discussed Mid-Atlantic Associates a couple of moments ago, but Mid-Atlantic Associates can only take one retirement distribution per calendar year. Managers have more flexibility in taking 401k withdrawals. Maybe your spouse is retiring from another employer, and they may have different rules or limitations to accessing their assets from their retirement plan. So it's important to understand the rules associated with your plan before making any withdrawals. And an additional thought along those lines, many work groups within Verizon derive from companies that were acquired by Verizon over the years. MCI is an example of that. And the MCI folks have a slightly different summary plan description than many other Verizon associates. So even though you might be a Verizon associate, it's still always a good idea to check your summary plan description or call Fidelity to confirm your understanding of your plan's rules before retiring and before implementing age 55 rule distributions. Okay, that's the age 55 rule. Now on to the 72T payment program. The 72T is also known as the Substantially Equal Periodic Payments or SEP program. And SEP programs must last for the greater of 5 years or until age 59 and a half. Unlike the age 55 rule, there is no age limitation to when you can start the 72T. It is the only option available to you if retiring before the year you turn age 55. And there are 3 different calculation methods that actually limit the amount of income that you could take in any given year. Unlike in the age 55 rule, where you could take varying amounts or as much as you would want to or need to from your retirement plan. Here, you cannot do that. And there's 3 calculation methods that limit the amount of income you can take in any year are the RMD method, the annuitization method, and the amortization method. And we're going to go over all 3 of those in detail, but it's important to note if you deviate at all from the payment program, the payment schedule that you initiate, a 10% penalty is applied to all payments you have made up until that point. So for example, if you're 52 years old and you initiate a 72T, and you deviate from the plan at age 57, not only is that payment penalized, but all prior payments that you've made in that 5-year period are penalized too. And you can see how that tax bill could add up. So that's why we always suggest, we highly encourage that you consult your advisor, consult an advisor who's experienced in implementing 72T SEP payment programs because the rules are very strict and nuanced. Okay, on to the calculation methods. The first method here is the required minimum distribution method, or also known as the RMD method. And the RMD method is calculated very similarly to the regular RMDs that many of you are familiar with that start at age 72. So the annual amount that you would be receiving from the RMD method is calculated using the year-end account balance divided by the life expectancy factor that you can find in the IRS life expectancy table. So the life expectancy table was updated. A new life expectancy table was updated and released in 2020. In 2022, taxpayers who are initiating a 72T payment program can use either the new or old life expectancy table. But beginning in 2023, taxpayers must use the new life expectancy table. So when comparing the required minimum distribution method to the other 2 methods, the RMD method results in the lowest starting payout compared to the others. And it also results in varying amounts of income from year to year, unlike the others, because you are required to recalculate the RMD payment each year. Okay, on to the annuity method and amortization method. Both of these methods result in a fixed payment amount for the duration of the 72T schedule, unlike the RMD method. You cannot deviate from the fixed annual amounts except for a one-time switch to the RMD method. But if you do make that one-time switch, you have no option to go back. So in looking at the calculation method for the annuity and amortization methods, there is a key factor in that calculation called the reasonable interest rate. And that is a key factor because it will directly affect how large the payment amount will be. So the higher the reasonable interest rate, the higher the withdrawal amount will be. It used to be that the reasonable interest rate that you could input into the calculation allowed by the IRS was capped at 120% of what was known as the midterm applicable federal rate, which is an interest rate that you could find on the IRS website that's updated monthly. But an important update beginning in 2022, taxpayers can use the greater of that 120% midterm applicable federal rate, or 5% as the reasonable interest rate. And this ultimately means in this current interest rate environment that retirees can create significantly more income penalty-free using the 72T. And we have an example of here to show you how that can happen. So this is an example using $1 million IRA. This person is retiring at the age of 52 and initiating a 72T. If you were to run a calculation for yourself, your numbers might look a little bit different than these, but this example could still be helpful to you. So here on the left table, both of these tables are identical except for one different variable being the reasonable interest rate. The left table shows a 5% reasonable interest rate. The right table shows the reasonable interest rate being 120% of the midterm AFR rate that as of May 2022. So 5%, and you can see there that's 2.51%. And you could see the difference in the amount of income that can be created using the annuity and amortization methods because of the change in reasonable interest rates. So the difference is on the right-hand side, that comes out to be roughly a 4.5% withdrawal rate, whereas on the left-hand side, it's closer to a 6.5% withdrawal rate. Not that you would necessarily want to take 6.5% of your portfolio in any given year. That may not be sustainable, but that higher withdrawal rate means that you can use less assets within that 72T to create the same amount of income, meaning that you can keep more of your assets in a separate IRA outside of the strict 72T payment structure. Okay, so on to some common misconceptions or mistakes that we see with the 72T rule. First one, thinking you can set your 72T payment at any amount you want. That is not true. The limiting factor is the calculation methods and the reasonable interest rate assumptions that the IRS allows you to make in your calculations. If you set higher payments or deviate from the calculation methods in any other way and are audited by the IRS, you will owe the 10% penalty on all prior distributions. Okay, mistake number two, entering retirement without a thorough understanding of rules and clear expectation of what your income will be. So again, once you start that 72T payment, you cannot deviate. And that 72T payment program, again, has to last for the greater of 5 years or until age 59 and a half. So in other words, it's a minimum of 5 years. It's important that the amount of income that you're taking will likely be enough for you throughout that 5-year period. So as part of that planning, you should have a plan in place for cost of living increases that might occur over that period. You should also have a plan in place if you are to need to access your wealth for a home, for a car repair, for a vacation, any other one-off expenditures of the like. It's important to have that plan in place. Okay, mistake number 3, thinking you must initiate a 72T from your entire retirement account balance. And that is not necessarily true. You can split assets into 2 IRAs, and you could potentially only start a 72T from one of them. You don't even have to start a 72T immediately when you retire. You can do that when you're ready to. And you have the flexibility from the second IRA to start another 72T payment program if needed, or you can let the assets grow outside of the 72T payment program. But we have an example here to break down how that could work. So here we have a $1 million IRA again, and this person needs $30,000 per year in income. So applying the reasonable interest rate to the entire IRA balance that gets you to the $30,000 per year income, we would view that as a mistake. You won't incur penalties if you do that, but we think that's a mistake because you are placing all of your assets within the strict 72T payment program. We think it would be much more to your benefit to use the highest possible reasonable interest rate and thus use the minimum IRA balance necessary to create the income that you need. And then you can keep the rest of the assets in a separate IRA. And if you need more income in the future, you could always initiate that separate 72T program from the separate IRA, or you could let the assets grow. So that was the 72T payment program. And so we'd like to take the next couple of minutes now to break down a comparison of the age 55 rule versus the 72T and discuss some of the pros and cons associated with both of those. Okay, looking at the age 55 rule, one of the main pros, again, is you can vary the amount of income you receive in each year. There's no minimum time period that you are forced to use the age 55 rule. Whereas with the 72T, once you put that payment plan in place, you are locked in with that payment program for the greater of 5 years or until age 59 and a half, and you cannot alter the amount of payments that you take. Now, one of the benefits of the 72T is that you can initiate a 72T from different types of accounts. It doesn't have to be just from the retirement plan of the employer you retired from, unlike the age 55 rule. You can do so within an IRA as well, and that could provide you with some more flexibility. So more pros and cons listed out here, but this is a general description here for you, a general breakdown. And you can see that some of the costs and benefits of each one of these methods can be complementary. The pros on one side might be the cons on the other side, right? So with that in mind, we will break down a couple of case studies for you to show you how you could use one or both of these methods in your retirement planning. Okay, so case study number one, Sally Smith plans on retiring at age 52. She has $600,000 in a pension lump sum. She has $700,000 in a current employer 401k. She has $50,000 in cash on hand as well, and she needs $4,000 a month. So first of all, because Sally is age 52, she cannot take age 55 rule distribution. She's too young to do so. So the only way she can create income from her retirement assets penalty-free is through the 72T payment program. And she can do so by combining the necessary amount of assets from her pension lump sum and her 401k to initiate a 72T. And we would recommend that Sally places the minimum amount needed into the 72T IRA to create the amount of income she needs. She has sufficient assets to do so, and then place the remainder in a second IRA. And then if Sally has any one-off expenditures that come up, again, that could be a vacation, that could be a car repair, she could first access the $50,000 in cash that she has on hand. But you could see here, she has plenty of assets to initiate to create income using the 72T. She has non-retirement assets on hand. Her income needs are healthy relative to the portfolio size. This is a classic case where the 72T payment program can really make sense. Okay, John Smith will retire at age 56. He has $550,000 in a pension lump sum. He has $900,000 in a current employer 401k, and he needs $4,000 a month. Okay, so John will be retiring in or after the year he turns age 55 and a half at age 56, so he can use the age 55 rule in addition to the 72T payment program. Since the 72T can be initiated from an IRA account outside of his Verizon 401k, John can elect to use the 72T to create monthly income versus the one withdrawal that John is allowed from the 401k. So with that in mind, John is going to initiate the 72T payment program with the minimum amount needed from all of his assets to create the $4,000 a month he needs for his living expenses. And then if any one-off expenses come up, John can access any assets that he still has within his 401k, and any withdrawals that he takes from the 401k would be taxed, but they would not be penalized. So this is an example of where it could make sense for this person to use a combination of both of these strategies. He's far enough away from his age 59 and a half that there could be some value to using the 72T. He's only locked into the 72T until age 61. That's only about a year and a half away from his 59 and a half birthday. So now in this case study, John Smith will plan on retiring at age 58. So a year and a half away from his 59 and a half birthday. Again, that's the time when, he can access his retirement assets as freely as he wants to. He has complete control over how he does it at 59 and a half. He has $500,000 in his pension lump sum now and $900,000 in his current employer 401k, and he needs $400,000 a month. So again, if John initiates a 72T payment program, he would have to continue for the minimum period of 5 years until age 63. A lot of his assets would be within that strict 72T payment program. Or John could decide to simply use age 55 rule distributions for the next year and a half. And that means he'll have greater flexibility at 59 and a half years old, not 63 years old. So this is an example of where This person could use both if they wanted to, but oftentimes we see people erring to just using the age 55 rule if they are that close to age 59 and a half. Okay, so those are a couple of case studies to show you how both of these methods can be used to your benefit. Having said that, we think it is very important as part of your comprehensive retirement planning process to make sure that you have a thorough understanding of these methods before implementing them in your plan. They are great resources for you. They are great tools that you can use to your benefit. However, there are complexities and nuances associated with these that can result in penalties if you aren't careful. So it's important to review these as part of your comprehensive planning. We highly encourage you to have a thorough understanding of these before implementing them and before using them in retirement. And if you have any questions about either of these methods, we've been helping Verizon associates implement these in their retirement planning for over 20 years. We understand the nuances of these rules. We also understand how to help you use the nuances of these rules to your benefit to help you maximize your retirement benefits. So our email address and office phone number are there at the bottom of the screen. We thank you for attending. Now we'll answer some questions for you as well. Okay, regarding the 55 rule, if more money is needed, can you take it from the after-tax portion of your 401k so no more taxes are owed? That's a great question. What this person is referring to is if you have an after-tax portion of your 401k, the contributions would not be taxed when taken out. You could convert those assets to a Roth IRA, and in doing so after a 5-year period, the growth of those assets would not be taxed as well. So I guess what I'm getting at is those are IRS-specific rules. Those aren't the Verizon-specific rule. Verizon has the rule, if you're a Mid-Atlantic associate, that you can only access your retirement account for withdrawal once per calendar year. So that's a question that would need to be confirmed with Fidelity, and we would need to check your summary plan description to have more clarity on that. But it's important to note, there are the after-tax component is an IRS-specific rule, and then how many withdrawals you can take is more of a Verizon-specific rule, and that needs to be confirmed. Okay, some more questions. If you are disabled, can you take early retirement withdrawals? Also, what are the penalties? If you are receiving disability, if you are deemed disabled, then withdrawals that you take from an IRA account would not be subject to the 10% penalty. So it wouldn't be necessary to initiate a 72T program or to take age 55 roll withdrawals for that matter either. You could roll the assets into your IRA and take withdrawals directly from that IRA? That's a great question. Okay, another frequently asked question. What happens if I try to take more than one withdrawal from my Verizon 401k? Okay, so if you're a Mid-Atlantic associate, again, you can only take one withdrawal per calendar year. If you try to take a second withdrawal, the only option is take a full distribution of your Verizon 401k in that case. So the second withdrawal would be a complete taxable distribution of your entire 401k balance. Okay, I am 53 years old and I want to retire this year. Can I take age 55 roll distributions from my 401k when I turn 55? This is one of the common misconceptions that we see all the time. You would have to retire within the calendar year you turn age 55. You can't retire before that period and then take age 55 rolls. Those age 55 roll distributions, those withdrawals would be penalized. Now, this person could roll those assets into an IRA and initiate a 72T payment program. Then they can use the assets to create income before 59 and a half and eliminate 10% penalties too. But no, they wouldn't be qualified to take age 55 rural withdrawals. Okay, can I take a one-off distribution from an IRA that I am using for a 72T distribution? That would be considered a deviation from your payment schedule that you initiated with the 72T. And if you deviate from your payment program, any prior withdrawals that you took from your account would be penalized, not just specific one-off distribution that this person is speaking to. So it's important to understand that with the 72T, if you deviate from that at all prior distributions are penalized as well. Much rather see this person, if they needed to take a withdrawal from a second IRA that's outside of the 72T schedule, that withdrawal would be penalized, but at least it wouldn't penalize all of the other payments that person made. And of course, the most preferential thing to do would be to take withdrawals from a non-retirement account or from a cash account. versus a retirement account in that case. Okay, what happens if the 20% tax withholding is more than I actually owe on my 401k distribution using the age 55 rule? If you paid more in taxes than you needed to because of that withholding, that's actually very common. When you file for taxes, you'd be very likely to receive a tax refund. Can I work part-time after retiring and while receiving income using the 72T exception? Yes, you can work part-time and you can initiate a 72T payment program at the same time. We see that very often when somebody is transitioning into retirement. They want to go from working full-time to part-time, and they use the 72T to supplement that part-time income that they're receiving. Okay, I am 56 and retiring. Can I move my 401k into my IRA and use the age 55 rule? No, you cannot. Again, the age 55 rule can only be implemented in the retirement plan of the employer you retire from. So it can't be done from an IRA. It can't be done from a previous employer plan. It can only be done from the plan of the employer that you retired from. I have a 401k with a company I worked for several years ago. Can I use that account for income using the age 55 rule when I retire? Yes, only if you roll those assets over before you retire. And that's the key, before you retire. Okay, I think that is it for questions here tonight. Thanks again for everybody for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. If you have any more, feel free to call us at our office number below, and we would be glad to help. Thank you and have a great evening.